My mother also has a ring exactly like that. The words reached him before he could hide the ring. For a brief, dangerous moment, his hand froze in midair. The thin leather cord stretched between his fingers and his collar. Then instinct took over. He slipped the cord back over his head, tucked it beneath his shirt, and closed his coat as if sealing something fragile and forbidden inside his chest. He did not look at the girl. The old train station breathed around them, rain rattling against the glass roof, footsteps slapping across wet stone, a distant announcement echoing with mechanical indifference. This place had always been good at pretending nothing important ever happened here. "Go on," he said curtly, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond her shoulder. "You shouldn't bother people." The girl didn't move. He could feel her presence beside the bench, small but stubborn, like a thought he refused to finish. "My mom really does," she said. "The ring. The same one." He sighed, irritation sharpening his voice. "Listen, I don't have time for this." That wasn't entirely true. He had all the time in the world today, but time was not the problem. Memory was. He finally turned his head, just enough to confirm what he already knew. She was young, 6, maybe. Dark eyes too serious for her age. A cardboard tray hung from her neck, holding gum, tissues, cheap candy. Her jacket was thin, her sneakers damp from the rain that had soaked the platform all afternoon. "People say a lot of things to get money," he said evenly. "Try someone else." He turned away again, dismissing her as he had dismissed so many things in his life. The past, regret, hope. For a few seconds, there was silence. He assumed she had left. Then he heard fabric rustle, followed by the soft thud of someone sitting down beside him. "I'm not asking you for money," the girl said. Against his better judgment, he glanced at her. She sat on the edge of the bench now, hands folded neatly in her lap, feet not quite touching the ground. She looked smaller seated there, but no less certain. "What's your name?" he asked, more sharply than he intended. "Annie." "Well, Annie," he said. "You shouldn't talk to strangers." She nodded. "My mom says that too. But she also says some strangers aren't really strangers. Just people you haven't met yet." He almost laughed. The sound caught in his throat and died there. "That ring," Annie continued, her eyes flicking briefly to his chest where the cord was hidden. "My mom keeps hers in a box. She doesn't wear it anymore." His jaw tightened. "You're mistaken." "I'm not," Annie said. "It has scratches on the side, and writing inside." He felt the familiar pressure bloom behind his ribs. He stood abruptly, straightening his coat, ready to leave. He had done this routine before: walk away, let the moment pass, return next year and pretend it was all coincidence. "I don't know who told you that," he said, "but this conversation is over." Annie looked up at him, unafraid. "She didn't tell me everything," she said. "Just that it was from someone who didn't come." The word hit him harder than the rain. "Enough," he snapped. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded bill, and held it out without looking at her. "Take this and go home." Annie didn't take the money. She didn't even glance at it. "I don't need it," she said quietly. "I just thought you should know." "Know what?" he asked despite himself. "That you're not the only one who comes here on that day." His hand stilled. Slowly, he lowered the bill back into his pocket. "What day?" he asked. Annie hesitated, as if weighing whether she was allowed to say it. Then she spoke. "September 17th. For a moment, the station tilted. He reached for the back of the bench, grounding himself against the sudden weakness in his knees. He had never said that date out loud here. He hadn't needed to. The place remembered it for him. "That's not something a child would know," he said hoarsely. "My mom says it every year," Annie replied. "She doesn't mean to. It just comes out." He looked at her now. Really looked. At the steady way she met his eyes, at the calm certainty in her voice. If this were a lie, it was the most convincing one he had ever heard. "Where is your mother?" he asked. Annie glanced toward the far exit of the station, where the city blurred behind sheets of rain. "At home. She doesn't like this place." He understood that more than he wanted to. "I think you're confused," he said, though the words sounded thin even to him. "And I don't want to waste time arguing with a child." Annie stood up. For a second, He thought she might cry or shout or call him names. Instead, she made a decision. "Wait here," she said. "I'm not. I'll show you." Annie interrupted, her voice small but firm. "I'll get the ring." Before he could stop her, she turned and ran, her sneakers splashing through shallow puddles as she disappeared into the rain-soaked street beyond the station doors. He stood there, staring after her, anger and disbelief warring with something far more dangerous hope. The sensible thing would have been to leave. To walk out, hail a car, return to his carefully constructed life, and let this encounter dissolve into another strange memory attached to this cursed date. Instead, he sat back down. Minutes passed. Trains came and went. The rain deepened, soaking the world in gray. He checked his watch once, then stopped himself. Time had never helped him here. Without thinking, he reached beneath his shirt and found the leather cord. The ring warm against his skin. He closed his fingers around it, his chest tightening as images he had buried long ago stirred another rain-soaked afternoon. A younger man standing paralyzed by fear, a woman waiting until hope finally gave way to resolve. He had told himself for years that the past was finished, that choices, once made, could not follow you. As he sat there, waiting for a child he had tried to ignore, he realized how wrong he had been. Some choices do not chase you, they wait. He told himself he would count to 10. If she didn't come back by then, he would leave. That was reasonable, sensible. He had already wasted more time than he meant to on a rainy afternoon and a child with a story that pressed too close to things he had buried carefully for years. 1. 2. The bench beneath him was cold, the wood damp from the mist that crept in from the open ends of the station. He adjusted his coat, straightened the cuff of his sleeve, small habits of control rising to the surface when his thoughts threatened to scatter. 3. 4. He watched the entrance without appearing to. People moved in and out of the station in uneven waves, commuters hurrying with heads down, an elderly couple sharing an umbrella, a man arguing into his phone, ordinary lives, uninterrupted. 5. 6. He reached for the ring without thinking, his fingers slipping beneath his shirt to find the familiar curve of metal hanging from the leather cord. The contact steadied him, as it always did, a reminder of what had been and what had been lost. He had learned to live with that loss, or at least to coexist with it. 7. This was foolish, he decided. Even if the child returned with a ring, it would prove nothing. Rings could be copied. Dates could be learned. Coincidences existed, no matter how much people wanted to turn them into meaning. 8. 9. The rain outside intensified again, blurring the street beyond the station doors into a wash of gray. Wind pushed droplets across the glass roof in thin, restless sheets. He felt the familiar ache settle in his chest, the one that came every year on this date, uninvited and unwelcome. 10. He stood. The movement was abrupt, decisive. He had indulged this place long enough. He stepped away from the bench, already turning toward the exit, his mind shifting automatically toward logistics. Calling a car, changing plans, moving forward. Wait. The voice was small but urgent. He stopped. Annie stood just inside the entrance, her chest rising and falling too quickly, her hair damp and clinging to her forehead. Her jacket was darker now, soaked through, and her shoes left wet marks on the stone floor as she took a few unsteady steps toward him. She was holding something in both hands, cupped carefully against her body as if it were fragile. "I came back," she said, unnecessary breathlessness in her voice, as though she feared he might accuse her of lying even now. He said nothing. He only watched her. Annie crossed the remaining distance between them and stopped a few feet away. For a moment, she didn't speak. She just looked up at him, searching his face, perhaps checking whether he was still the same man she had left behind minutes earlier. Then she opened her hands. The ring lay in her palm. The station seemed to fall silent, not literally, but in the way moments sometimes do when the world withdraws to make room for something else. His gaze fixed on the small circle of metal, his mind resisting even as his body recognized it instantly. Silver, simple, worn. He took a step closer before he realized he was moving. "That's," he began, then stopped. Annie extended her hand a little farther, offering it to him. "This is hers," she said. "I told you." His fingers hovered over the ring, hesitant, as if touching it might break something that could not be repaired. When he finally took it from her, the metal felt colder than he expected, as though it had spent years waiting to be warmed again. He turned it slowly, his thumb tracing the familiar imperfections along the band. Each scratch was a memory he had not meant to keep but had never been able to erase. Then he tilted it, just slightly. The engraving inside caught the dull station light. September 17th. His breath left him in a single, silent exhale. The ring slipped lower in his grasp, and he closed his hand around it quickly, steadying himself before the ground could tilt beneath his feet. If this moment stayed with you, take a second to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you are listening from. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. Annie watched him closely. "It's the same," she said, not as a question, but a statement. "Yes," he replied, his voice hoarse. "It is." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The ring rested in his palm, heavier now than it had been seconds before. This was not coincidence. It could not be. He had lived too long with the weight of that date to pretend otherwise. "Where did she keep it?" he asked at last. "In a little box," Annie said, "with old pictures and papers she doesn't look at anymore. She says some things are better remembered quietly." He nodded once, understanding far more than she realized. "Did she know you brought it?" he asked. Annie shook her head. "No. She wouldn't let me if she did." Why did you do it then?" Annie hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Because you looked like someone who didn't know if he should stay or go," she said softly. "My mom says that's the worst feeling." The words landed with a precision that made his chest tighten. He slipped the ring back into Annie's palm, closing her fingers gently around it. "You shouldn't have run through the rain," he said, avoiding her eyes. She shrugged. "It's okay. I run fast." He almost smiled, then caught himself. "Does she know I'm here?" he asked. Annie shook her head again. "She knows someone like you comes here every year. She just doesn't want to see you." He absorbed that in silence. He had no right to argue with it. He had forfeited that right the day he didn't arrive. "I'm glad you came back," he said finally. Annie nodded, satisfied. "I told you to wait." She slipped the ring into her pocket and adjusted the strap of her tray. Before turning away, she looked up at him one last time. "You're still here," she said, as if confirming something important. "Yes," he answered. "I am." Annie smiled, not wide or triumphant, but calm. "Certain." Then she turned and walked back toward the entrance, disappearing once more into the rain. He remained where he was, standing now instead of sitting, the bench behind him empty. The station felt different, altered by the brief weight of truth it had held. He reached beneath his shirt, finding the familiar cord and ring that belonged to him, and closed his fingers around it. For the first time in years, the ache in his chest was not alone. He didn't leave after Annie disappeared into the rain. That, more than anything else, told him this day was already different. He sat back down on the bench, slower this time, as if the air around him had thickened. The station felt altered not in any visible way, but in the subtle shift that comes when a place stops being a memory and starts becoming something else. The tracks were the same, the echo of footsteps was the same, yet the silence between sounds seemed heavier, weighted with what had just passed through it. He replayed the moment in his mind with an almost painful clarity. Annie's small hands opening, the ring resting in her palm. The date, September 17th. He had carried that day like a private sentence, one he served quietly, year after year. He never told anyone why he came here. Not his wife, not his colleagues, not the people who assumed his success insulated him from regret. This place had been his confession, spoken only to the walls and the tracks and the empty space beside him where someone should have been. Now a child knew. That unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He checked his watch again, not because he was in a hurry, but because he needed something concrete to anchor himself. The hands moved forward, whether he wanted them to or not. Time had never waited for him. No matter how often he returned to the place where he had once refused to move, a train rolled in, brakes screaming in protest, and a cluster of passengers spilled onto the platform. Among them was a woman pushing a stroller, a man holding the hand of a little boy, their heads bent close together as they navigated the crowd. The sight tightened something in his chest. He turned away. Annie had said her mother didn't like this place. He understood that now. This station was not neutral ground. It remembered too much. It held on to the moments people wished they could undo and played them back without mercy. He wondered what she had done after leaving him. The woman who had waited. The woman who had stepped onto a train alone when it became clear he was not coming. He had imagined her life in fragments over the years. Sometimes he pictured her angry, hardened by disappointment. Other times he imagined her happy, laughing with someone else. The memory of him reduced to a faint scar. Both versions hurt in different ways. Neither had ever included a child. A child changed everything. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. His reflection wavered faintly in the darkened glass of a nearby vending machine. He looked older than 40 in moments like this, lines etched deeper by thoughts he rarely allowed himself to finish. She waited, he murmured under his breath. The words felt strange in his mouth, as if saying them aloud gave them a weight they had always possessed but he had refused to acknowledge. Waiting was not passive. Waiting was an act of faith, and he had broken it. Footsteps approached from behind. He straightened, his body reacting before his mind caught up. For an irrational second, he expected to see Annie again, or worse, to see the woman herself standing there, rain-soaked and silent, the way she had stood so long ago. Instead, it was a station attendant, older, with a lined face and a tired expression. "Sir," the man said politely, "we'll be closing this platform soon. I'll be gone in a minute," he replied. The attendant nodded and moved on, leaving him alone again with the echo of his thoughts. He stood and paced a few steps, then stopped. His hand drifted to his chest, finding the familiar shape beneath his shirt. The ring he wore, his ring, felt different now, less like a wound, more like a question. What did he owe her? The answer came quickly, brutally. Nothing, and everything. He had no right to ask for forgiveness, no right to explanation, no right to insert himself into a life that had been built without him. Whatever comfort his presence might bring would be outweighed by the damage it could cause. He knew this. He had built his adult life on understanding consequences, and yet, Annie's face surfaced in his mind. Not pleading, not accusing, simply certain. "You're not the only one who comes here on that day." He exhaled slowly. That meant the woman returned too. Or at least she had returned once. More than once. Maybe. He imagined her standing somewhere just beyond his line of sight, watching him year after year, measuring his presence and his absence, deciding whether either still mattered. The thought made his throat tighten. The rain outside had softened into a steady drizzle, the kind that soaked through clothing without announcement. He watched the station doors, half expecting Annie to reappear again, as if she were the messenger of some truth still unfinished. She didn't. Minutes passed. The platform grew quieter as the evening wore on. Lights flickered on overhead, casting a pale glow across the benches and tracks. He made a decision then, not a dramatic one, not the kind that changed lives in a single stroke, but the kind that mattered because it was deliberate. He would stay until the last train, not because he expected anything to happen, but because leaving early felt like repeating the same mistake in a different form. He had walked away once when waiting demanded courage. He would not do it again tonight. He returned to the bench and sat, posture looser now, as if the rigid control he carried so carefully had cracked just enough to let something human through. He let his thoughts wander, not away from the past, but through it. He remembered her laugh, the way she used to tuck her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the quiet confidence with which she had said she would wait, as if waiting were simply another thing she did well. He swallowed. "I should have come," he said softly, to no one. The words did not absolve him. They were not meant to. They were an acknowledgement, long overdue. Somewhere beyond the station walls, Annie was likely back at home now. The ring returned to its box, her mother perhaps scolding her gently for running through the rain. He wondered what the woman would say when she realized what Annie had done. Whether she would be angry, afraid, or simply tired. He would find out soon enough, because he knew, with a certainty that frightened him, that this was not the end of the story. It was the moment before it began again, the moment when the past, once recognized, refused to stay buried. The station clock ticked forward, indifferent and relentless. And for the first time in many years, he did not look away. He noticed her before he realized why his chest had tightened. She stood near one of the concrete pillars by the far end of the platform, half in shadow, her coat darkened by rain, her posture rigid in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. At first glance, she could have been anyone, just another woman waiting for a train that was already late. But something about the way she stood, the way her hands were clasped too tightly in front of her, pulled at him with a familiarity that made his breath falter. He told himself he was imagining it. He had done that before. Many times. Faces in crowds, silhouettes caught at the edge of his vision. The mind was cruel like that, especially when it returned to places heavy with memory. He forced himself to look away, fixing his gaze on the tracks, on the glistening rails that stretched forward and disappeared into the distance. Don't do this, he thought. Not again, but when he looked back, she was still there. The station lights flickered slightly, casting her features into clearer relief. And then, there was no denying it. Time had changed her, softened some lines, carved others, but it had not erased her. He recognized the curve of her cheek, the way her chin lifted when she was bracing herself. He had known that face once as intimately as his own. She had not moved closer. She had not called his name. She simply stood there, watching him with an expression he could not immediately read. Shock rippled through him, followed by something sharper, almost painful in its intensity. He stood too quickly, the bench scraping softly against the stone floor. His heart pounded, loud enough that he wondered if she could hear it from where she stood. She took a single step forward. That was all it took. I waited, she said. Her voice was quieter than he remembered, roughened slightly by years and weather and things unsaid. But the words were unmistakable, simple, precise. They struck him with more force than any accusation ever could. I know, he replied, though his voice barely carried past his own chest. She stopped a few feet away from him, leaving a careful distance between them. The air felt charged, as if the space itself remembered what had happened here before and was holding its breath. I wasn't sure you'd still come, she said. I always come, he answered, then winced at how hollow that sounded. Coming now meant nothing compared to the moment he had failed to show up when it mattered. She gave a small nod, as if she had already known that too. So do I, she said. The admission settled heavily between them. The idea that she had returned here not once, but more than once, twisted something deep in his chest. He had imagined her moving on, building a life untouched by this place. The reality was far more complicated. You shouldn't, he said quietly. This place only keeps old wounds open. She met his gaze then, fully, and there was no anger in her eyes, only exhaustion. Some wounds don't close just because you stop looking at them. I know. He had no answer for that. A train roared past on a nearby track, the rush of air tugging at their coats, forcing them to pause until the noise faded. When silence returned, it felt heavier than before. I saw you talking to her, she said. He stiffened. Annie. Yes. Her mouth softened slightly when she said the name. She shouldn't have bothered you. She didn't, he replied immediately. I mean, she did, but not in the way you think. 8. Her gaze dropped briefly to his chest, to the place where the cord lay hidden beneath fabric. When she looked back up, there was a flicker of recognition, and something like resignation. She found the ring, she said. He nodded once. She brought it back. A beat passed, then another. You still have yours, she said, not as a question. Yes, she exhaled, slow and steady. I thought you might. I am. They stood there, two people bound by an object neither of them had ever been able to let go of. Rain continued to fall outside, tapping softly against the station walls, as if urging them to speak before the moment slipped away. I didn't come here to confront you, she said finally, and I didn't come here to forgive you. I wouldn't expect you to, he said. Good, she replied, because I can't. Not like that. The honesty in her voice hurt more than anger would have. He nodded, accepting it. He had built his life on accepting things too late. Annie shouldn't have run through the rain, he said, seizing on the one thing he could say without reopening old wounds. She was soaked. A faint, reluctant smile touched her lips. She always is. She never listens. She listens, he said. She just decides for herself. Graft is upper. That earned him a sharper look. One that carried the ghost of the woman he had loved, the one who had never waited passively. No matter how long she stayed. She's stubborn, she said. Like her father. The word landed between them, fragile and dangerous. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. You don't get to claim that, she added quietly. Not yet. I know, he said. I'm not asking to. We're heading. Another train announcement echoed overhead, reminding them both that time was moving, whether they were ready or not. She didn't know what she was doing, the woman said. Annie. She just saw something familiar and followed it. I'm glad she did, he replied. Even if you're not. She studied him for a long moment, searching for something sincerity, perhaps, or proof that he was not the same man who had once stood paralyzed by fear while she waited on this very platform. I didn't expect to see you, she said at last. Not like this. I didn't expect to be seen, he admitted. Silence stretched again. But it was different now. Less brittle. Still painful. But grounded in something real. I should take her home, she said. It's late. He nodded. Of course. She hesitated, then added, She talks about you. His head snapped up. She does? Yes, she said. About the man who waits. The phrase struck him deeply, reshaping something inside him. He had never thought of himself that way. Waiting had always felt like penance, not identity. I won't come back here next year, she said suddenly. The words startled him more than he expected. Why? Because this place doesn't get to decide what happens next, she replied. We do. She turned to leave, then paused, her back still to him. You made a choice once, she said. So did I. Now there's a child involved, and she deserves better than silence. Was not. She looked back at him one last time. If you're going to stay, then really stay. Then she walked away, disappearing into the corridor that led out of the station. Her footsteps steady, unhurried. He remained where he was, the echo of her words settling into him. Stay. Really stay. For the first time in years, the idea frightened him more than leaving ever had. He didn't follow her. That was the first thing he understood. Standing alone on the platform after she disappeared into the corridor, with the steady certainty of someone who had already made peace with moving forward. Every instinct urged him to go after her, to say something, anything that might slow her steps or soften the line she had drawn between them. But he stayed where he was, because chasing her now would have been about easing his own fear, not honoring hers. The station felt emptier without her, though the same number of people still moved through it. The echo of her words lingered, settling into him with a weight that refused to be shrugged off. If you're going to stay, then really stay. He repeated the sentence silently, testing it, the way he tested contracts before signing them. It was not a demand, it was a boundary, one he had never learned to respect when it mattered most. He left the station slowly, not through the corridor she had taken, but through the main doors that opened onto the rain-darkened street. The city greeted him with the low hum of traffic and the smell of wet asphalt. He paused beneath the awning, letting the drizzle fall just short of his shoes, and looked back once more at the entrance. For years, this place had been an ending. Tonight, it felt like something else. Not a beginning, he wasn't naive enough to believe that, but a reckoning. The drive home passed in a blur. He sat in the back seat, hands folded, his reflection faint in the window as the city slid by. Familiar streets, familiar lights, a life constructed with precision and restraint. He wondered how many times he had returned from this station to this same quiet, carrying the same ache, telling himself it was enough to remember without changing anything. It wasn't. At home, the house was warm and orderly, every light exactly where it was supposed to be. His wife was already upstairs, asleep. He moved through the space carefully, as if sound itself might accuse him of something. In the study, he poured himself a glass of water he didn't drink and stood by the window, staring out at the rain-soaked garden. Annie's face came to him again, not pleading, not hopeful, just certain. He sat at the desk and opened the drawer he rarely touched. Inside lay documents, neatly organized, and beneath them, An old envelope yellowed at the edges. He hesitated, then opened it. The photograph inside was creased and faded, the corners soft from being handled too often. Two younger faces stared back at him, standing close together, unaware of the distance that would one day stretch between them. He traced the outline of her face with his thumb and felt something tighten behind his eyes. "I should have come," he said aloud. The words sounded different here, spoken in the quiet of his own home. Less like confession, more like acknowledgement. He slept poorly that night. Dreams came in fragments, train whistles, rain on glass, a child's hand opening to reveal a ring. He woke before dawn, heart racing, the echo of her voice still sharp in his mind. By mid-morning, he had made a decision. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't driven by guilt alone. It was, for once, deliberate. He returned to the station, not to the platform this time, but to the surrounding neighborhood. He walked the streets slowly, observing without intruding. Small shops with fogged windows, a corner bakery opening its doors, an apartment building with peeling paint and a flickering light above the entrance. This was not a world he frequented, but it was one he recognized in a way that unsettled him. He had grown up closer to places like this than he liked to remember. He saw Annie first. She stood near the corner, her tray already hanging from her neck, her jacket dry today, her braids neat. She spotted him almost immediately. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, as if reassessing him. "You came back," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I said I would stay." She considered that, then nodded. "Okay, is your mother home?" he asked. Annie's expression shifted, cautious now. "She said you might come," she said. "She told me not to talk too much." "That's fair," he replied. "I won't stay long." She studied him for a moment longer, then turned and led him toward the apartment building. Each step felt heavier than the last. He had negotiated mergers worth billions without breaking a sweat. This felt infinitely more difficult. They stopped in front of a door on the second floor. Annie knocked once, then stepped back. The door opened slowly. She stood there, framed by the dim light of the hallway, her face composed but guarded. The sight of her closer now, unfiltered by distance or rain, hit him with a force he hadn't prepared for. She looked tired, strong, changed, and unmistakably herself. "You said you wouldn't chase," she said quietly. "I didn't," he replied. "I waited." She held his gaze, measuring him. Then, after a long pause, she stepped aside. "5 minutes," she said. "That's all." He nodded. "Thank you." The apartment was modest, clean, filled with signs of a life lived carefully. A child's drawings on the wall, a worn couch, a small table by the window where a jewelry box sat, closed. Annie hovered near the doorway, watching them both. "I don't expect anything," he said, choosing his words with care. "I just wanted to tell you. I know now. About the ring. About waiting." She crossed her arms. "Knowing doesn't undo choosing." "I'm aware," he said. "I'm not here to undo anything." She studied him, searching for the familiar signs of avoidance, of excuse. Finding none, she spoke again. "Then why are you here?" He met her eyes. "Because there's a child," he said. "And she deserves more than silence." The room felt very still. Annie glanced between them, then sat down on the floor, her tray set aside, as if she sensed this was a moment that required her to listen without interrupting. "We can't change the past," he continued, "but we can decide what comes next, slowly, carefully, on your terms." She exhaled, a sound caught somewhere between relief and exhaustion. "We'll see," she said. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't a closed door either. And for the first time since that missed train, he understood that staying was not about proximity, it was about patience. He stayed only the 5 minutes she had given him. That mattered. He could feel the restraint in his own body, the careful way he stood just inside the doorway. Hands visible, posture open but not familiar. The man he had become knew how to take up space. Tonight, he made himself smaller on purpose. The apartment was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic filtering through a cracked window. It smelled faintly of soap and something warm, rice, maybe, or soup left cooling on the stove. The walls were bare in places, but not empty. Children's drawings were taped near the kitchen doorway. Bright suns, uneven stick figures, a crayon train stretching across a page. Annie's work, he realized, his chest tightening at the thought. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that had taken years to learn. Not hostility, not fear, vigilance. Annie had settled on the floor near the couch, knees pulled to her chest, eyes moving between them. She said nothing, but she missed nothing. "I won't stay longer than you asked," he said again, quietly. "I just wanted to say one thing without the station watching." She gave a short, humorless breath. "The station has seen enough of us." "Yes," he agreed. "It has." Silence followed, the kind that presses instead of pauses. He could feel the urge to fill it rising in him, the instinct to explain, to justify, to soften the edges of what he had done with language polished by years of negotiation. He resisted it. "I didn't come that day," he said finally. Her jaw tightened. She looked away toward the window, the muscles in her neck rigid. "I know. I don't say that as an excuse," he continued. "I say it because I've spent more than 10 years pretending it was something else. A misunderstanding, bad timing, fate. He shook his head once. "It wasn't. It was a choice." She turned back to him then, her eyes sharp. "Yes," she said. "It was." Annie shifted slightly on the floor but remained silent. "I chose what was easier to explain," he went on. "What was safer. What everyone around me told me was reasonable. And I told myself I could live with it." Her laugh was quiet and brittle. "You built a life on it." "Yes," he said. "And I paid for it every day." "That's not the same," she replied. "Regret is not the same as consequence." "I know." He meant it. He had learned the difference too late, but he had learned it all the same. "You left," she said, her voice steady now. "I waited. Then I stopped waiting. Not because it stopped hurting, but because I had to live." "I don't blame you," he said. "You don't get to," she replied. "But I don't need you to." That stung, precisely because it was true. His gaze drifted, despite himself, to the small table near the window. The jewelry box sat there, closed, its surface scratched with age. He did not ask about it. He had learned, finally, that some questions were not his to ask. "Annie shouldn't have brought the ring," she said after a moment. "That wasn't fair to either of us." "She didn't do it to be fair," he said gently. "She did it because she recognized something." Her eyes flicked to him. "You think children understand things like that?" "I think children understand more than we give them credit for," he replied. "They just don't dress it up." Annie lifted her head slightly at that, a faint spark of approval in her eyes. "She knows something's missing," her mother said quietly. "She's always known. I tried to protect her from it. From you. From this." "And now?" he asked. And now she saw a ring and decided the truth mattered more than comfort. She said, "I raised her to be brave. I didn't expect it to come back like this." He nodded, absorbing that. "She is brave." "She is," her mother agreed. "And stubborn. Like you," he said before he could stop himself. The words hung between them, uninvited. Her expression softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. "Don't." "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "That was familiar," she finished. "And I don't need familiar right now." He accepted that with a small nod. "I won't push," he said. "I won't make promises I don't know how to keep. All I'm asking is permission." "For what?" she asked. "To be present," he said. "Not as anything defined. Not yet. Just present. On your terms. On Annie's." She studied him with the same careful scrutiny she had used at the station, the same assessment she had likely used on every difficult choice since that day. He could almost see the calculation happening behind her eyes, not of benefit, but of risk. "And if I say no?" she asked. "Then I'll respect it," he said. "Completely," Annie frowned. "That wouldn't be fair," she said suddenly. Both adults turned to her. "You said people get to decide what comes next," Annie continued, her voice small but certain. "That means everyone." Her mother closed her eyes briefly. then opened them again. "This is complicated." "Sweetheart, I know," Annie said. "But complicated doesn't mean quiet." The room felt very still. He said nothing. This was not his moment to speak. Her mother looked at her daughter for a long moment, something like grief and pride crossing her face at once. Then she turned back to him. "You don't get to be her father," she said. "Not like that." "Not yet. I understand," he replied. "But you can be honest," she continued. "You can show up when you say you will. And you can leave when I ask you to." "Yes," he said. "And no gifts," she added. "No grand gestures. No trying to make up for lost time all at once." He almost smiled. "That would be a mistake." "Yes," she said. "It would." She took a breath, then said the words he hadn't dared to hope for. "We'll take it one day at a time." Relief did not flood him. This was not victory. It was something quieter, more fragile. "Thank you," he said. She didn't respond to that. She glanced at the clock on the wall instead. "Your 5 minutes are up," he nodded, accepting the dismissal without resentment. He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth," he said softly. "I'm sorry. Not for being here now. For not being here then." She met his gaze, her eyes unreadable. "I know," she said. "That doesn't fix it. But it matters." He left without another word. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street glistened under the streetlights, clean and sharp. He stood there for a moment, breathing in the night air, aware of how heavy and how light he felt all at once. Behind him, a door closed gently. In front of him, the rest of his life waited uncertain, unearned, and no longer silent. The next morning arrived without ceremony. He woke before his alarm. The sky outside still pale and undecided, and lay still for several minutes, listening to the quiet rhythm of the house. His wife's breathing was steady beside him, familiar, unchanged. This was the life he had chosen, the one that ran smoothly because it asked so little of his heart. He rose carefully, dressed without turning on the light, and went downstairs. In the kitchen, he made coffee he barely tasted and stood by the window, watching the day come into focus. For the first time in years, September 17th did not feel like something he needed to survive. It felt like something he needed to answer. He did not go to work. That alone would have shocked most people who knew him. He rarely missed a day, rarely disrupted the rhythm he had built so meticulously. But this was not a day for schedules. This was a day for restraint, for doing only what he had been permitted to do, and nothing more. He waited. Mid-morning passed. Noon. The house remained quiet. He resisted the urge to check his phone for messages that were not coming. He had said he would not push, and he meant it. Presence, he reminded himself, was not the same as intrusion. It was nearly 2 o'clock when his phone vibrated. A single message. No greeting. No explanation. "You can come by. 30 minutes. He read it twice, then once more, as if repetition might change its meaning. It didn't. 30 minutes was not an invitation. It was a boundary. "I'll be there," he typed back. "Thank you." He left immediately, choosing to walk instead of drive. The air was cool and clean after the night's rain, the sidewalks still darkened by moisture. The neighborhood looked different in daylight, less guarded, more ordinary. Children played on stoops. A woman swept the front of a shop. Life moved forward in small, unremarkable ways. When he reached the building, he paused at the door, steadying himself. This was not the train station. There were no ghosts here, only consequences. He knocked once. The door opened, and Annie was there, her hair pulled back neatly, her jacket replaced by a sweater that looked too big for her. She brightened when she saw him. "You came," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I said I would." She stepped aside without waiting for permission. "Mom's in the kitchen." He entered slowly, mindful of the time. The apartment felt different in daylight, too, less heavy, more lived in. Sunlight fell across the small table by the window, illuminating the jewelry box. It remained closed. Her mother stood by the counter, a mug in her hands. She did not smile, but she did not look away. "You have half an hour," she said. "I know," he replied. Annie climbed onto a chair and swung her legs, watching them both. Can he sit? She asked. Her mother hesitated, then nodded once. Yes, he can sit. He took the chair opposite Annie, placing his hands flat on the table, palms down. It was a small gesture, but intentional. He was not here to take anything. Annie studied him for a moment. You look different today, she said. How? He asked. You look like you're listening, she replied. Her mother hid a reaction behind a sip of coffee. I am, he said. They spoke cautiously at first. Simple things. Annie's school, her favorite subject. The stray cat that lived near the alley behind the building. He listened more than he talked, answering when asked, never elaborating unless invited. The minutes passed more quickly than he expected. Why do you come to the station every year? Annie asked suddenly. The question landed squarely between them. Her mother stiffened. Annie, it's all right, he said gently. He met Annie's gaze. Because I made a promise there, he said, and I didn't keep it. Do, Elf? Annie frowned. Why not? He considered the question carefully. Because I was afraid, he said, and because I thought choosing one thing meant I had to lose everything else. That doesn't make sense, Annie said. He nodded. It didn't, but it felt like it did at the time. Her mother watched him closely, as if measuring the distance between words and truth. Fear makes people small, Annie said thoughtfully. Yes, he agreed, it does. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. He glanced at it once, then forced himself not to again. He would not be the one to push the time. I don't want you confusing her, her mother said finally. She doesn't need promises. I won't make any, he said. I'm not here to explain myself away. I'm here to be clear. And what is clear? She asked. That I will show up when invited, he said. That I will leave when asked. And that I will not disappear without explanation. Silence followed. Not hostile, just careful. Annie hopped down from her chair and went to the window. You can see the street from here, she said. If someone leaves, you can still watch them walk away. He swallowed. I know. She turned back to him. Are you going to leave now? He checked the clock. 28 minutes had passed. Yes, he said. If that's okay. Her mother nodded once. That's okay. He stood, smoothing his jacket, then paused. Thank you, he said, not to Annie, but to her mother. For letting me come, I woed. She studied him for a long moment. Don't make me regret it, she said. I won't, he replied. He left without looking back. Outside, the day had warmed slightly. He walked away from the building at a measured pace, resisting the urge to turn around. Staying, he was learning, also meant knowing when to go. Behind him, Annie watched from the window until he reached the corner and disappeared from view. For the first time since that missed train, he felt something unfamiliar settle into his chest, not relief, not hope, but the quiet weight of responsibility, and he accepted it. The first thing he learned about staying was that it required restraint. Days passed, then a week, and he did not return to the apartment unless invited. He did not drive past the building. He did not ask questions that would force answers she was not ready to give. This was unfamiliar discipline, different from the kind demanded by business or reputation. This kind required humility. He sent one message 3 days after his visit. I'll be near the station this afternoon. If Annie would like company on her walk home, I can be there. If not, I understand. The reply came an hour later. You can walk with her. No detours. No gifts. He read it twice. Then once more. Understood. He arrived early and waited across the street, leaning against a lamppost, hands in his coat pockets. The neighborhood had settled into late afternoon rhythm shops closing. Parents calling children home. The smell of food drifting from open windows. He stood out here in a way he hadn't inside the apartment. His clothes were too neat, his posture too composed. He felt it, the invisible line between worlds. Annie spotted him first. She came out of the school building with her backpack slung low, braids swinging as she scanned the sidewalk. When she saw him, she lifted her hand in a small wave, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. You came, she said, falling into step beside him. Yes, he replied. I said I would. She nodded, satisfied. Mom says that matters. They walked at her pace, not his. He noticed how she skipped over cracks in the sidewalk, how she narrated her day without being prompted, who got in trouble, who cried, which teacher smelled like peppermint. He listened, responding only when invited, the way he had learned to do around people who mattered. Halfway down the block, she stopped abruptly. "That's the bakery," she said, pointing. He followed her gaze. "It is. I be reason. They throw away bread at the end of the day," Annie continued. "But sometimes the lady gives me one if I help stack chairs. That's kind of her," he said. Annie shrugged. "She says food shouldn't be punished for getting old." The words lodged somewhere deep in him. When they reached the building, Annie slowed, her earlier ease giving way to caution. She glanced up at him. "You're not coming in," she said. "No," he agreed. "I'm not." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I. She hesitated, then added, "You can come again tomorrow." "Maybe. I'll wait to hear," he said. That earned him a small smile. She ran up the steps without looking back. He remained on the sidewalk until the door closed behind her, then turned and walked away, feeling the strange mix of fullness and restraint settle in his chest again. The second invitation came the following week. "You can join us for dinner. 1 hour." He arrived precisely on time. Dinner was simple: rice, vegetables, a pot of something warm simmering on the stove. He offered to help, was refused, and accepted it without protest. He took the seat he was given, and spoke when spoken to. Annie chattered through most of the meal, unbothered by the careful tension threading through the room. She asked him questions that adults rarely did. "Why do you wear suits even when you don't have meetings?" "Because I forget I don't have to," he answered honestly. "Do you like your house?" "Yes," he said, then corrected himself. "I'm used to it." "That's not the same," Annie said. Her mother hid a reaction behind her glass. After dinner, Annie disappeared into her room, returning with a piece of paper folded carefully in half. "I made this," she said, holding it out to him. He hesitated, then took it. It was a drawing, crayon lines forming a train station, 2 figures on a platform, one small, one tall. Above them, rain. "I didn't draw faces," Annie said, "because I don't know yet." His throat tightened. "Thank you," he said. She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her room. Her mother began clearing the table. He stood to help, then paused, remembering the rules. "I should go," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Yes." At the door, he stopped. "I want to be clear about something," he said. "I won't stay if I'm in the way." "You're not," she replied. "You're just new. I can live with that." She studied him, then said quietly, "Annie asked me yesterday if people can be added to a family later." He said nothing. "I told her families change all the time," she continued. "That doesn't mean they forget where they started." He nodded. That was fair. She met his eyes. "Don't make me regret telling her that." "I won't," he said. He walked home under a sky streaked with the last light of day, the folded drawing tucked carefully into his coat pocket. That night, he placed it in the drawer beside the old photograph. Not as a replacement, as a continuation. Staying, he was learning, was not about claiming space. It was about earning trust, one ordinary moment at a time, and for the first time in his life, that felt like enough. By the 3rd week, Annie stopped treating his arrival like an event. That was how he knew something had shifted. She no longer rushed to the door when he came, no longer announced him with the same quiet excitement. Instead, she would glance up from whatever she was doing, nod once, and return to her homework or her drawings as if his presence had settled into the room the way furniture did noticed, but no longer examined. He understood the significance of that more than she ever could. He came only when invited, sometimes to walk her home, sometimes to sit at the small kitchen table while she did her math, counting softly under her breath, sometimes just to listen while her mother spoke about ordinary things, work hours, rising rent, the neighbor who played music too loud at night. He listened the way he had learned to listen in rooms where words mattered, but this was different. These words were not currency. They were trust. One evening, Annie pushed her chair back abruptly and looked at him with an expression too serious for her age. "Do you remember your mom?" she asked. The question startled him. He had not expected it. He glanced toward her mother instinctively, but she was washing dishes, her back turned, shoulders tense, but unmoving. "Yes," he said carefully. "I do. What was she like?" He paused, choosing honesty without weight. "She was patient," he said, "and stubborn, and she believed people could become better if given time." Annie considered that. "Did she wait too?" He swallowed. "In her own way," he said. Annie nodded, as if that answer fit into something she had already been building. She returned to her chair and picked up her pencil again. Later that night, as he was leaving, her mother spoke. "You don't have to keep coming so carefully," she said, not unkindly. "She's getting used to you." "I don't want to assume," he replied. She studied him for a long moment. "You assume everything else in your life." "Yes," he said. "That's why I won't hear." She gave a small nod. "Fair." The word stayed with him on the walk home. Fair. He had spent his adult life negotiating what was legal, what was advantageous, what was profitable. Fair had always been someone else's concern. Now it felt like the only metric that mattered. The first time Annie called him by his name instead of "you," it happened without ceremony. They were walking back from the corner store, the air sharp with approaching winter. She stopped suddenly, staring at a crack in the sidewalk. "Do you think," she said slowly, "that if someone waits a really long time, they should get something back?" He hesitated. "I think waiting changes people," he said. "Sometimes it gives them strength. Sometimes it takes it away." "That's not an answer," Annie said. He smiled faintly. "It's the only honest one I have," was the word. She accepted that, then said, "I think people should get something back, even if it's not what they wanted." He looked at her, struck by the quiet certainty in her voice. "You might be right." She took his hand then, briefly. Not out of need, not out of habit, just a small, deliberate gesture, like punctuation at the end of a sentence. He did not squeeze back. He simply let her hold it until she let go. That night, he told his wife he needed to talk. They sat across from each other in the living room, the house too quiet, the air too still. He did not begin with explanations. He began with truth. "There is a child," he said, "and she matters." His wife listened without interruption, her face composed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. When he finished, she said nothing for a long time. "You should have told me years ago," she said finally. "Yes," he agreed. "And now?" "And now I'm not asking for permission," he said. "I'm asking for honesty." She nodded slowly. "Then be honest," she said, "about what this will cost." He met her gaze. "Everything that was built on silence," he said. She looked away, toward the window. "I always wondered what you were waiting for," she said quietly. "I didn't know how to stop," he replied. She stood then, smoothing her sleeve. "We'll talk more," she said. "Not tonight." He did not argue. The following week, Annie asked him a question he had been bracing for. "Are you my dad?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Her mother froze. He did not answer immediately. He knelt so he was at Annie's eye level, careful not to reach for her, not to cross any line that had not been offered. "I'm someone who should have been there," he said slowly, "and someone who wants to be honest with you now." "That's not a yes or a no," Annie said. "No," he agreed. "It's not." She studied him, then nodded. "Okay," she said. "We can talk about it later." Her mother exhaled sharply, emotion flickering across her face before she mastered it. That night, he walked home under a sky heavy with clouds, his chest aching in a way that felt strangely clean. He had not claimed anything that was not his to claim. He had not been granted anything he had not earned. But the silence between them had changed. It no longer hid the truth. It made room for it. Staying, he realized, was no longer about proving he would not leave. It was about being strong enough to let others decide when he could belong. The question did not leave the room after Annie asked it. It stayed there, suspended between the three of them, shaping every silence that followed. No one tried to force an answer into that space. Her mother busied herself with small tasks, stacking dishes that were already stacked. wiping a counter that was already clean. Annie returned to her drawing, humming softly under her breath, and he sat very still, aware that anything he said now would echo longer than he intended. That night, he did not sleep. He lay awake listening to the city settle outside his window. The distant sirens, the hum of traffic, the soft sounds of a life that continued regardless of his internal reckoning. Annie's question replayed in his mind, not accusatory, not demanding, simply curious. Children, he was learning, asked the hardest questions without armor. By morning, he knew he could not keep living in fragments. He went to work for the first time in weeks and discovered how strange it felt to return unchanged to a world that no longer fit him. Meetings blurred together. Numbers made sense, but they felt abstract, distant. He found himself watching people speak, wondering what truths they carried quietly, what choices they had made that no balance sheet could reveal. At lunch, he stepped outside alone and called her. She did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. "Is Annie with you?" he asked. "She's at school," she replied. "Good," he said. "Then I'd like to talk. Not to decide anything, just to be honest." There was a pause on the line, long enough that he prepared himself for refusal. "All right," she said finally. "Come by tonight." After dinner, he arrived at the apartment as the sky darkened, bringing with it a quiet resolve he had not felt before. This was not about proving himself. It was about removing the last layer of evasion. Annie greeted him with a nod and returned to her room without prompting. The door left slightly ajar. Her trust, he realized, was practical. She trusted patterns, not promises. Her mother gestured for him to sit. This time, she did not mention the clock. "I won't answer her question for you," she said immediately. "That's not my place. But I won't let you confuse her either." "I understand," he replied. She studied him, then asked, "Do you know what you want to be to her?" He considered the question carefully. "I want to be someone she can count on," he said. "Whatever name that takes." She nodded slowly. "That's the right answer. It doesn't make it easy." "I'm not looking for easy," he said. "I gave that up a long time ago." She looked away, her gaze settling on the closed jewelry box by the window. "When you didn't come," she said quietly, "I told myself it was better that way, that if you could leave once, you would leave again." "I believed that too," he admitted. "I believed it about myself. And now I know leaving is a choice," he said. "Not an accident, not fate. A choice I don't intend to make again." She turned back to him, her eyes sharp, but searching. "Words are cheap." "Yes," he agreed. "That's why I'm not asking you to believe them." A small, tired smile flickered across her face. "Good. We have." Annie appeared in the doorway then, her presence quiet but unmistakable. She held a notebook against her chest. "Can I ask something?" she said. Her mother hesitated, then nodded. Annie looked at him. "If you are my dad," she said slowly, "does that mean you have to live here?" "No," he answered immediately. "It means I have to be honest." She frowned. "What if I don't want you to live here?" "Then I won't," he said. She considered that. "What if I want you to come to my school thing next month?" "If you invite me," he said, "I'll be there." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What if I change my mind?" "Then I'll respect that too." She studied him for a long moment, testing the edges of what he was offering. Finally, she nodded. "Okay." She turned and disappeared back into her room. Her mother exhaled, the tension easing just a fraction. "She's practical," she said. "She needs to feel in control." "So do I," he replied. "I'm just learning when not to use it." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt earned rather than imposed. "I'm going to tell her the truth," her mother said at last. "All of it. Slowly, in a way that doesn't make her feel like she was a secret." He nodded. "Thank you." "For what?" "For trusting me enough to do that," he said. She regarded him steadily. "Trust is provisional," she said. "It can be revoked." "I know," he replied. When he left that night, the air felt colder, sharper. He walked home without checking his phone, without rehearsing conversations that had not yet happened. For the first time, he felt aligned with the uncertainty ahead. A week later, Annie asked him to come to her school assembly. She did not phrase it as a test. She stated it as a fact. "You can sit in the back," she said. "You don't have to talk to anyone. I'll sit wherever you want," he replied. The day of the assembly, he arrived early and took a seat against the wall, unnoticed. When Annie stepped onto the stage with her class, she scanned the room once and found him immediately. Their eyes met. She gave a small nod and turned back to her teacher. He did not wave. He did not smile. He simply stayed. Afterward, she ran to him, breathless. "You came." "Yes," he said. She nodded, satisfied. "Okay." As they walked home, she took his hand again, briefly, deliberately. That night, he placed another item in the drawer beside the photograph and the drawing a folded program from the assembly. Proof, not of redemption, but of presence. He was no longer waiting to be chosen. He was choosing, every day, to remain. The truth did not arrive all at once. It unfolded in pieces, carefully chosen, placed where Annie could reach them without being crushed by their weight. Her mother told her first that there had been a promise, then that the promise had been broken. Later, that some broken things could still matter, even if they could not be repaired the way people wished. Annie listened without interrupting. She asked questions when something did not make sense. She asked fewer when it did. He was not present for most of those conversations. By design. This was not his story to narrate. His role was to be available, not visible. To answer honestly when asked, to stay quiet when silence was required. The day Annie finally used the word father, it was not directed at him. They were walking home from school, the air bright with early autumn sun, leaves just beginning to turn at the edges. She kicked a stone along the sidewalk, following its uneven path with concentration. "My friend Maya says her dad lives somewhere else," Annie said casually. "She sees him on weekends." He kept his gaze forward. "That can happen. She says it's weird sometimes." Annie continued. "But not bad weird. Just different." He nodded. "Different doesn't always mean wrong." Annie stopped walking. "Mom says you're my father," she said. Matter of fact, he stopped too. "Yes," he said. He did not soften it. He did not decorate it. He let the truth stand on its own. Annie considered this, then resumed walking. "Okay," she said. That was all. Later that night, after Annie was asleep, her mother sat across from him at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she had already finished. "She took it better than I expected," she said quietly. "She's been preparing for it," he replied. "In her own way. She asked me why you didn't come," her mother continued. He swallowed. "What did you tell her?" "That you were afraid," she said. "And that fear makes people do things they regret." He nodded once. That was honest. "She asked if you loved me," her mother said, her voice steady but watchful. He did not answer immediately. "I told her love isn't always enough," she went on, "and sometimes it arrives too early, before people know what to do with it." That was also honest, he said. She met his gaze. "She didn't ask if I loved you." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything they had not said for years. "I don't want to confuse her," her mother said finally. "She doesn't need hope she can't carry." "I won't offer it," he replied. "Not like that." Days passed. Annie began introducing him to people not as her father, not as a stranger, but as someone who walked with her. The shop owner on the corner, the crossing guard who knew every child's name. He followed her lead, accepting the role she assigned him without adjustment. At school pickup one afternoon, another parent asked, "Is that your dad?" Annie glanced at him, then back at the woman. "He's mine," she said simply. He felt the weight of that word settle into him, not as permission, but as responsibility. That evening, he told his wife everything. Not the edited version, not the careful omissions, everything. She listened without interruption, her face composed but pale. When he finished, she sat very still for a long time. "You're changing the terms," she said at last. "Yes," he replied. "And you're prepared for what that costs?" "I don't know yet." he said honestly. But I'm prepared to stop pretending it doesn't cost anything. She nodded slowly. That's the first honest thing you've said about this. They did not resolve anything that night. They did not need to. Silence, for once, was not avoidance. It was space. Weeks turned into months. Annie grew more comfortable asking him questions that had edges. About his childhood. About mistakes. About whether people could be two things at once, good and flawed. Loving and absent. Yes, he told her. They can. She accepted that with the same seriousness she brought to all important information. One afternoon, she handed him a piece of paper. I wrote something, she said. You don't have to keep it. He unfolded it carefully. It was a list. Things I know now. People can leave and still come back. 2. Waiting doesn't mean you stop living. 3. Being honest is harder than being quiet. 4. My dad is not a story. He's a person. He looked up at her. His vision blurred. You can keep it, she added. If you want. I want, he said. That night, he placed the paper in the drawer with the photograph, the drawing, the school program. Not as a shrine to regret, but as a record of becoming. Staying, he had learned, did not erase what was lost. It transformed it into something that could be carried without breaking. And for the first time, that felt like a future. Winter arrived quietly, without asking permission. The first snow fell on a Tuesday morning, thin and uncertain, dusting the sidewalks just enough to change the sound of footsteps. Annie pressed her face to the window before school, breath fogging the glass. It's not real snow yet, she announced. It's thinking about it. He stood behind her, hands in his coat pockets, watching the city slow under the pale sky. It usually does, he said. It thinks for a while before committing. B's 9. She smiled at that, then grabbed her backpack and ran for the door. He followed at a careful distance. A rhythm they had developed together close enough to be present, far enough to respect the space she still needed. Winter brought changes he hadn't anticipated. Schedules shifted. Afternoons grew darker sooner. Annie tired more easily, her questions coming in shorter bursts, her thoughts turning inward as the days shortened. He noticed it because he was paying attention now, not because anyone pointed it out. One evening, she asked him to help with a school project, not homework, something else. It's about family, she said, spreading construction paper across the table. Not the kind that lives together, the kind that still counts. He sat beside her, careful not to take over. What do you need from me? She looked up. Just answers, not speeches. That's fair, he said. She drew while she asked where he grew up, why people married people they didn't love anymore, whether promises stopped being real if they were broken once. He answered each question plainly, not sparing himself, not burdening her. When she finished, she pushed the paper toward him. On it were 3 circles connected by uneven lines. One labeled me, one labeled Mom, one labeled him. Is that okay? She asked. He studied it. It's honest, he said. That's more than okay. She nodded, satisfied, and gathered her things. You can stay for dinner, she added, as if it were an afterthought. Her mother did not object. That, too, mattered. As winter deepened, the conversations grew heavier. His wife asked questions he could not answer cleanly. About time, about intention, about whether honesty now erased dishonesty then. No, he told her, but it changes what comes next. Eros. They spoke late into the night. Voices low, careful not to disturb the shape of a life they had built together. There were no raised voices, no dramatic declarations, just the steady dismantling of assumptions that could no longer stand. You're asking me to live with your past, she said one evening. No, he replied. I'm asking you to live with my present. She considered that. I don't know if I can, she said. I know, he answered. They agreed to time, to distance, to not pretend that love alone could resolve what honesty had uncovered. It was not an ending. It was not a reconciliation. It was acknowledgement. Annie sensed the shift before anyone explained it. You look tired, she said one afternoon as they walked home, snow crunching beneath their shoes. I am, he admitted. Is it because of me? She asked, too quickly. No, he said firmly. He stopped walking and crouched to her level, meeting her eyes. It's because sometimes doing the right thing costs more than you expect. That doesn't mean it's wrong. She studied him, searching for the crack between words and truth. Finding none. She nodded. Mom says adults don't like it when things change, she said. Adults like control, he replied. Change takes that away. I don't mind change, Annie said, as long as people don't disappear. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest. I won't, he said. Not without telling you, Doctor, that winter, he missed his first year-end board meeting. No one said it out loud, but it was noticed. He did not explain. He spent that evening at Annie's school auditorium instead, sitting in a folding chair while she stood on stage with her classmates, reciting lines she had practiced until they lived comfortably in her mouth. She searched the room once, found him, and smiled not wide, not performative, just enough. Afterward, she ran to him, flushed with cold and excitement. You stayed the whole time, she said. Yes, he replied. That was the point. Her mother watched them from a distance, her expression unreadable. Later, as they walked home together, she spoke. She trusts patterns, she said. You're building one. I intend to. He replied. She nodded. Just remember, patterns break when people stop paying attention. I won't, he said. Winter pressed on. Snow piled against the curb. Days shortened further. And somewhere in the quiet persistence of routine, something fragile began to stabilize. Not happiness, not forgiveness, stability. On the last night of the year, Annie asked a question he had been expecting. Where will you be tonight? She asked. He considered the truth. At home, he said. Then here. If that's all right. Minner, she nodded. Mom says you can come after midnight. I'll be there, he said. When the clock turned and the city exhaled into a new year, he stood in a small living room, holding a paper cup of something warm, while Annie counted down loudly, her voice confident and clear. When midnight arrived, she hugged him without hesitation, not tightly, not desperately, just enough. Happy New Year, she said. Yes, he replied, his voice steady. It is. He understood then that this was not a story about restoration. It was a story about responsibility, about choosing presence when absence would be easier, about staying even when staying did not promise reward. And for the first time, he did not wonder what he would lose by continuing. He wondered only how carefully he could protect what was growing. Spring did not arrive all at once. It announced itself cautiously, the way trust did one warmer afternoon, one stubborn bud on a bare tree. One day when Annie forgot her coat and didn't need to go back for it, the city seemed to exhale, shedding the tight discipline of winter for something looser, less guarded. He noticed the change most in Annie. She lingered longer outside after school. She talked faster, her thoughts jumping ahead of her words. She argued more, too, not angrily, but with the confidence of someone who felt safe enough to push back. One afternoon, as they walked home beneath branches just beginning to green, she asked, Do you think people can start over more than once? Yes, he said without hesitation. But each time costs something different. She frowned. That sounds unfair. It is, he agreed. But it's also real. I'm said it. She accepted that with a nod and skipped ahead, counting sidewalk squares again, her faith in the future both fierce and uncomplicated. Spring also brought consequences he could no longer postpone. His wife asked for distance, not dramatic, not cruel, but firm. Space to think, space to decide whether the man he was becoming could still exist within the life they had built together. He moved into a small apartment closer to Annie's neighborhood, choosing proximity without presumption. He did not tell Annie right away. He waited until she asked, Why do you walk from over there now? She said one day, pointing vaguely east. Because I live there, he replied. Her steps slowed. You moved? Yes. Because of us? Because of honesty, he said. And because sometimes living closer to the truth means changing where you stand. She considered this. Are you sad? Yes, he said. And hopeful. Both can exist. She nodded. Mom says that too. Donby, her mother noticed everything. said little. She watched patterns the way some people watched weather alert to shifts, prepared for storms. When he mentioned the move, she did not comment. She simply adjusted expectations, boundaries redrawn with quiet precision. "You're closer now," she said one evening. "That doesn't mean more access." "I know," he replied. "Good. Trust," he was learning, did not expand on its own. It was extended deliberately, then tested. Annie's school year wound toward its end. Projects grew bigger. Emotions ran closer to the surface. One evening, she came home unusually quiet, her backpack heavier than usual. "What happened?" her mother asked gently. Annie shrugged. "Someone said something dumb." He waited. "They said I was lucky," Annie continued. "Because I have 2 dads now." Silence settled. Her mother's jaw tightened. "What did you say?" "I said I have 1 mom," Annie replied, "and 1 dad who's learning." "We're boudn't." He felt the words land in him with a careful weight. "That was brave," her mother said. Annie shrugged again. It was true. Later, as he walked Annie to the corner, she looked up at him. "Are you learning fast enough?" He smiled faintly. "I'm trying." "That's different," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "It is." That night, he sat alone in his new apartment, the walls bare, the quiet sharper than he expected. He unpacked slowly, deliberately, placing only what mattered. The photograph, the drawing, the list Annie had written. He did not arrange them together. They did not need to touch to belong. He called his wife. They spoke without accusation, without defense, 2 people acknowledging that love could exist alongside limits. "I don't hate you," she said. "I know," he replied. "I just don't know if I can live inside the shape your truth makes," she continued. "That's fair," he said. They ended the call without resolution. It hurt less than he expected, or maybe it hurt differently, cleaner. Weeks passed. Annie's birthday approached quietly, deliberately unannounced. He noticed the calendar date and said nothing. He would wait to be invited. He had learned that lesson well. The invitation came 3 days before. "You can come, cake only, no speeches." He smiled at the message. On the afternoon of her birthday, the apartment buzzed with the contained chaos of a small celebration. Balloons taped unevenly to the wall, a cake that leaned slightly to one side. Annie in a dress she pretended not to care about but clearly loved. When he arrived, she looked at him critically. "You're early." "Yes," he said. "But I waited outside." "That counts," she decided. During cake, she made a wish without closing her eyes. Her mother noticed but said nothing. "What did you wish for?" he asked later, as dishes were cleared. Annie shook her head. "If I say it, it won't work." "That's fair," he said. As he prepared to leave, she handed him a small paper bag. "For you," she said. "You don't have to open it now." He waited until he was home. Inside was a simple keychain, a train charm, worn at the edges. "So you don't forget where you started," a note read in uneven handwriting. He closed his eyes briefly, the weight of it settling into his palm. Spring deepened. Leaves filled in. Days lengthened. Annie grew louder, bolder, more sure of her place in the world, and he learned that staying did not mean the absence of fear. It meant choosing despite it. One evening, as they sat on the stoop watching dusk gather, Annie leaned against him without thinking. "You're not going anywhere, right?" she asked. He did not answer reflexively. "No," he said carefully. "Not without telling you. Not without making sure you're ready." She nodded, satisfied with the honesty. "Okay," she said. "Then we're good." We're quote. He watched the sky darken, the first stars appearing faintly overhead, and felt the strange, steady weight of a life no longer divided between what was and what might have been. He was not redeemed. He was responsible. And for the first time, that felt like something he could live with. Summer arrived with noise. Windows stayed open later. Music drifted from passing cars. Children argued and laughed in the streets long after dinner should have ended. Annie absorbed it all, her energy expanding with the daylight, her questions sharpening again, no longer tentative but curious in a way that demanded real answers. It was the season of tests, not the dramatic kind, not ultimatums or confrontations. Smaller ones, more dangerous. "Can you come on Saturday?" Annie asked one Thursday evening. feet tucked beneath her on the couch. He did not answer immediately. "What's Saturday?" "I'm going to the park with my class," she said. "Parents can come." Or people. Her mother glanced up from the sink but said nothing. "I can come," he said carefully. "If you want." Annie nodded. "Okay, but you have to stand with the other adults. No hovering." "I'll stand where you tell me," he said. Saturday was bright and unforgiving. The park buzzed with families clustered on benches, coolers open, conversations overlapping. He arrived early, as always, and chose a spot near the edge of the crowd. Visible, but not central. Annie spotted him halfway through a game and waved once, briefly, before returning to her friends. No announcement. No claim. That, he understood, was trust. He stayed until the end. When Annie ran over, flushed and breathless, she asked only one thing. "You stayed the whole time?" "Yes," he replied. She nodded. "Good." Later that afternoon, her mother spoke as they walked back. "She watches what you do when you think no one is looking," she said. "So do you," he replied. "Yes," she agreed. "That's the point." Summer also brought the question he had been avoiding. His wife asked to meet, not to argue, not to reconcile, to speak plainly, without witnesses or rehearsed lines. They met at a quiet cafe near the river, the kind of place that invited reflection whether you wanted it or not. She arrived on time, as she always had, her posture composed, her expression unreadable. "You've changed," she said after they sat. "Yes," he replied. "Do you like who you're becoming?" she asked. He considered the question honestly. "Some days," he said. "Other days, I'm terrified of him." She nodded. "That's the man I married," she said softly, "the one who knew fear and still chose carefully." "And now?" he asked. "And now you're choosing differently," she said. Not recklessly, just openly. They spoke for over an hour. About loss, about responsibility, about the quiet cruelty of living well, while something essential remained unspoken. "I won't ask you to choose," she said at last. "Between me and them. That's not fair to anyone." "I wouldn't accept that," he replied. She smiled faintly. "I know. That's how I know you mean what you're doing." They parted without promises, without bitterness. It was not an ending. It was permission. Annie sensed the shift before he said anything. "You look lighter," she observed one evening as they sat on the stoop, the air thick with heat. "I talked to someone important," he said. "Did it hurt?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "Did it help?" "Yes," she nodded. "That's usually how it works." Summer pressed on. Annie learned to ride a bike without training wheels. He ran behind her for 2 blocks before she shouted, laughing, "You can let go now." He did. She wobbled, corrected, rode on. He stood there, breathless, pride sharp in his chest, understanding the lesson with painful clarity. Letting go did not mean leaving. It meant trusting what you had helped build. One evening, as cicadas hummed and the light softened, her mother spoke quietly. "She asked me if she could call you Dad." "It is 80. His heart stalled. He did not speak. "I told her that was her choice." Her mother continued. "But that words carry weight, and once you use them, they change things." "I know," he said. "She hasn't decided yet," she added. "I wanted you to know before it surprised you." "Thank you," he replied. His voice was steady. His hands were not. That night, alone in his apartment, he sat with the weight of it. The word, the permission, the responsibility. He did not rehearse responses. He did not imagine scenes. He had learned better. When Annie was ready, he would listen. Days later, it happened without ceremony. They were walking home, the street warm and golden, the air heavy with summer. Annie kicked a pebble ahead of them, tracking its uneven path. "Dad," she said casually, not looking at him. "Can you come to my thing next week?" The world narrowed. "Yes," he said. "I can." She nodded, satisfied, and continued walking as if nothing irreversible had just occurred. He stopped for a fraction of a second, then followed, his chest aching with something dangerously close to joy. That night, her mother watched him closely. "You didn't correct her," she said. "No," he replied. Good, she said. Neither did I. Summer deepened. The city grew loud and tired. The days stretched. The nights stayed warm. And something settled into place, not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. He was no longer waiting to be forgiven. He was building something that did not erase the past but stood beside it, steady and deliberate. When autumn came, it would bring its own tests. But for now, the season held, and that was enough. Autumn arrived the way truth often did, quietly, unmistakably, and without asking whether anyone was ready. The air sharpened overnight. Leaves turned in uneven patches, some clinging stubbornly to green while others surrendered all at once. Scattering across sidewalks Annie liked to drag her feet through. She had started third grade with a seriousness that surprised him, her backpack heavier, her patience thinner. Calling him Dad did not become a habit immediately. She used the word once, then not again for days. Sometimes weeks. Sometimes she would stop mid-sentence, correct herself, and choose his name instead. He never corrected her either way. Words, he had learned, settled when they were ready. What changed was everything else. She expected him now. Not just presence, but consistency. If he said Tuesday, she noticed when it became Wednesday. If he was quiet, she asked why. If he hesitated, she waited, but she remembered. One evening, after a long day, she confronted him with the blunt efficiency only a child possessed. You didn't come last Friday. He did not deflect. You're right, he said. I had a meeting I didn't handle well. You said you would. She replied. Yes, he said. And I should have told you earlier that I couldn't. She crossed her arms, mirroring her mother in a way that made something twist inside him. If you forget, that's one thing, she said. But if you choose something else, you have to say it. He nodded. That's fair. She studied his face, deciding whether his answer earned the effort of forgiveness. Then she shrugged. Okay, just don't do it again. He did not promise. He adjusted. Autumn also brought clarity with his wife. They met again, not at a cafe this time, but in the quiet of a public park where distance softened hard edges. The trees overhead were already thinning, light filtering through branches like cautious permission. I think I know what I need, she said after a long silence. He waited. I need to stop waiting for you to come back to the man you were, she continued. And I need to stop pretending I can follow you into who you're becoming. He absorbed that without protest. That's honest, he said. Yes, she replied. And painful. I know. They spoke of logistics then. Not bitterness, not blame. Just the dismantling of a shared life that had been built on good intentions and withheld truths. They agreed on fairness, on dignity, on not making each other the villain of a story neither had fully understood at the beginning. When they parted, there were tears. Quiet ones, clean ones. He did not feel relieved. He felt aligned. Telling Annie came later, not immediately, not dramatically. He waited until she asked the question that mattered. Why don't you sleep at that house anymore? She asked one afternoon, watching him unlock the door to his apartment. Because sometimes adults change their minds about what they can carry, he said. Did you fight? She asked. No, he replied. We told the truth. She considered this. Truth makes things fall apart, she said. Sometimes, he agreed. Sometimes it keeps them from rotting. She nodded slowly. Mom says that too. Autumn deepened. Her mother watched him more closely now. Not with suspicion, but with recalibration. Boundaries shifted subtly, not looser. Clearer. You can take her to the museum on Saturday, she said one evening. Bring her back by 6. Yes, he replied. At the museum, Annie moved with purpose, reading placards aloud, asking questions that jumped centuries at a time. She stopped in front of an old train exhibit and stared at it longer than the rest. This one didn't miss, she said. No, he agreed. It didn't. She glanced at him sideways. Do you still think about that day? Yes, he said. But not the same way. How? She asked. I don't go there to punish myself anymore, he replied. I go to remember what waiting costs. She nodded, satisfied. That's good, she said. Punishment doesn't fix anything. Late October brought rain again, not the dramatic kind. Persistent. Cold. the kind that soaked through shoes and made everything smell like earth and metal. Annie came home one afternoon, quieter than usual, her shoulders drawn in. "What happened?" her mother asked gently. Annie hesitated, then said, "Someone said I shouldn't call you Dad because you weren't there when I was born." The room went still. He did not speak. Her mother knelt in front of her. "What did you say?" "I said families don't all start at the same time," Annie replied. "Some show up late but stay." He felt his throat tighten. "That was brave," her mother said. Annie shrugged. It was true. That night, as he walked home alone under a streetlight flickering with indecision, he understood something fundamental. Staying was no longer the hardest part. Being worthy of staying was. November arrived with colder mornings and longer shadows. Annie's questions turned inward again. Less frequent but heavier. "Do you think people get what they deserve?" she asked once, watching steam rise from her breath. "No," he said honestly. "I think they get what they choose to carry." She considered this. "Then you're carrying me." "Yes," he replied, "and I want to." She nodded, satisfied, and reached for his hand without looking. Thanksgiving came quietly. He did not assume. He waited. "You can come," her mother said simply. "But it's not a performance." "I wouldn't know how," he replied. The meal was small, uneven, real. There was laughter that surprised him. Silences that did not accuse. Food that tasted better for being shared without expectation. At one point, Annie raised her glass of juice. "I'm thankful," she said, serious as a judge, "that people can change without pretending they didn't mess up." He did not speak. He did not need to. As autumn leaned toward winter again, he stood once more at the edge of a season changing, not waiting for absolution, not hoping for erasure. He was present. He was accountable. And when Annie slipped her hand into his pocket as they walked home that night, unthinking and sure, he understood that this ordinary, fragile trust was the only proof that mattered. December arrived with intention, not gently, not quietly. It arrived with early darkness and sharp air, with calendars filling too quickly and expectations rising whether anyone invited them or not. Annie felt it first. He could see it in the way she counted days aloud, in the careful attention she paid to storefront decorations, in the way her questions circled the same subjects without quite landing. "Do you like Christmas?" she asked one evening as they walked home, their breath visible now. "Yes," he said. Then after a pause, "But I'm still learning how to." She accepted that answer, but it did not settle her. Winter break came, bringing long mornings and restless afternoons. Annie's energy bounced between excitement and something quieter, harder to name. She rearranged her room twice in 1 week. She asked about traditions, what people always did, what they never changed. "What did you do when you were little?" she asked. He thought back carefully. "We went to my grandparents' house," he said. "There was too much food and not enough room." People argued and laughed in the same sentence. "That sounds messy," Annie said. "It was," he replied. "And it mattered." She nodded, filing it away. Her mother noticed the tension too. "She's trying to place herself," she said one night as they stood in the kitchen, voices low. "Holidays do that. They make children measure where they belong." "I don't want to confuse her," he said. "You won't," she replied. "As long as you don't compete." He understood immediately. "I won't." The question came a few days later, delivered with the casual precision Annie used when something mattered a great deal. "Where will I be on Christmas morning?" she asked, sitting cross-legged on the couch. Her mother looked at him briefly, then back at Annie. "You'll be here," she said. Annie nodded. Then she looked at him. "Will you be somewhere else?" He considered the truth carefully. "I'll be where I'm invited," he said. "And where it makes sense." She frowned. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." Silence followed, not tense, but expectant. Her mother spoke first. "We can have breakfast together," she said. "All of us, if we keep it simple." He looked at her, surprised. She met his gaze evenly. "One morning," she added. "No pretending." I would like that," he said. Annie's shoulders relaxed visibly. "Okay," she said. "That works." December deepened. The city leaned into winter routines. Lights went up. Music repeated everywhere. People hurried with purpose, carrying packages and unspoken expectations. He moved through it all carefully, resisting the urge to overcorrect, to make gestures that would tip into performance. On the morning of the 24th, Annie handed him a folded piece of paper. "You have to open this now," she said. Inside was a list. Rules for tomorrow. 1. No surprises. 2. No leaving early. 3. If it feels weird, we say so. 4. Pancakes count as tradition. He smiled. "These are good rules." She nodded. "I worked hard on them." Christmas morning arrived cold and clear. He arrived exactly when agreed, carrying nothing but himself. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and batter. Annie was already dressed, hair brushed with deliberate care. "You're on time," she said. "Yes," he replied. That was rule 2. She grinned, then caught herself and grew serious again. Breakfast was quiet at first, comfortable, but careful. Pancakes steamed on plates. Annie talked about a book she'd finished, about a character who had to choose between staying and starting over. "What did they choose?" he asked. "They stayed," she said. "But they changed how?" He nodded. "That's the hardest part." After breakfast, Annie disappeared into her room and returned with a small box. "This one's from me," she said, handing it to him. "You can open it." Inside was a scarf. Plain, dark blue, soft, "so you don't look cold when you wait," she explained. His chest tightened. "Thank you," he said. She nodded, satisfied, and turned to her mother. "Yours next." They did not linger. They did not pretend the morning was anything other than what it was, a shared moment. Finite and deliberate. When it was time to go, Annie walked him to the door. "You're coming back later, right?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "If you want." She considered, then nodded. "Okay." Outside, the cold bit sharply. He stood for a moment on the sidewalk, breathing deeply, absorbing the weight of what had just passed. It had not been perfect. It had not been easy. It had been honest. That afternoon, he returned as promised. Annie showed him her new book, then promptly ignored him to read it. He sat nearby, content to exist in her orbit, without demand. That night, as he prepared to leave, her mother spoke. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not trying to fix anything," she replied. "For letting it be what it was." He nodded. "That's the only way it works." As December edged toward its close, he found himself back at the train station, not on the platform, not on the date that had once owned him. Just passing through, on his way home, carrying a bag of groceries and a scarf he now wore without thinking. He paused briefly, looking out over the tracks, the place where his life had once split in two. He did not feel the urge to sit. He did not feel the pull to wait. The station was just a station now. A place where people arrived and departed, where choices were made and then lived with. Outside, the night was cold and clear. The year was ending, and for the first time, he was not measuring what he had lost. He was measuring what he was trusted with. January arrived without ceremony. No countdown, no promises. Just cold mornings and the quiet insistence of routine returning after the holidays released their grip. Annie went back to school with new pencils and old confidence. He went back to work with a sharper awareness of what no longer mattered. The world had not changed. He had. The first week back, Annie tested him again, not consciously, not cruelly, but with the instinct of a child who had learned that stability revealed itself over time. "You're late," she said one afternoon as he met her at the corner. "I am," he admitted. 5 minutes. She studied his face. "Why?" "I stayed too long in a meeting," he said, "and I didn't leave when I should have." She nodded slowly. "Did you try to?" "Yes." "That counts," she decided. "But next time, tell me." "I mesnas." "I will," he said, and he did. January brought smaller conversations, quieter ones. Less about the past, more about the present. Annie talked about friends who lied, and teachers who noticed, about how some adults spoke kindly but didn't listen, and others listened without saying much at all. "You're the second kind," she said once, not looking at him. He felt the weight of that settle into him, not pride, not relief, but responsibility. Her mother watched this phase with cautious attention. "Children don't need perfection," she said one night as they stood by the sink, the sound of water filling the room. "They need patterns that don't disappear." "I know," he replied. "I won't." She turned to him then, studying his face. "You say that differently now." "Yes," he said, "because I'm not trying to convince myself anymore." January also brought the final conversation with his wife. Not dramatic, not public, just two people sitting across from each other with the understanding that clarity, once reached, should not be delayed. "I think we've reached the edge of what we can be to each other," she said calmly. He nodded. "I think we passed it some time ago. There's no villain here," she continued. "Just truth that arrived late." "Yes," he agreed. They spoke of fairness, of respect, of ending something without destroying what had once been good. When they stood to leave, she paused. "I hope she knows," she said. "Who?" he asked. "The little girl," she replied. "That she mattered enough to change you." He swallowed. "I'll make sure she does." When Annie learned that he would be living alone permanently now, she surprised him. "That's okay," she said. "Some families are quieter." "Yes," he agreed, "but no less real." She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her book. Winter pressed on. Snow returned briefly, then retreated. Days lengthened almost imperceptibly. Annie grew less watchful, more certain. She argued less about whether he would come, and more about what they would do. One afternoon, she handed him a permission slip. "It's for a field trip," she said. "You can't come, but I wanted you to see it." He took it carefully. "Thank you." She hesitated. "You're not mad?" "No," he said. "I'm proud." That night, alone in his apartment, he sat with the quiet again, but it no longer accused him. It felt earned. He thought about the station not as a wound, but as a point of origin. A place where waiting had once meant punishment, and now meant patience. He did not go there this year. February arrived. Valentine's Day passed quietly, acknowledged only by Annie with a lopsided card she made at school. It read, "Some people love loud, some people love steady. You're steady." He kept it. One evening, as they walked home under bare trees, Annie asked, "Do you ever wish it had been different?" He considered the question honestly. "Yes," he said. "And no." She frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "I wish I hadn't hurt people," he said. "But I don't wish away the part where I learned to stay." She nodded. "Mom says sometimes you have to lose the right thing to learn how to keep it." "That's true," he said. She slipped her hand into his, smaller now compared to before, but no less sure. "Are we okay?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "We are." March approached, bringing with it a date he had once circled in silence. September 17th had lost its power. This one had not. Annie's birthday loomed again, and with it, a quiet realization. Time did not erase what had been lost, but it did build something alongside it. Brick by brick, moment by moment. One evening, her mother spoke what had been hovering unspoken for weeks. "She asked if you would be at her party this year," she said. He waited. "As her dad," she added. He felt the weight of it settle into him not like a chain, but like a mantle. "I will be," he said. "If she wants me there." She nodded. "She does." That night, he stood at his window, looking out at the city lights, steady and indifferent. He thought of all the years he had believed waiting was an act of suffering. He understood now that waiting, when done right, was an act of care. He had missed a train once, but he had not missed this. March arrived softly, as if it understood the weight it carried. The air warmed without announcing itself. Snow retreated into thin, forgettable patches along the curb. Annie counted the days not out loud this year, but in small, private gestures lining up her shoes by the door, rearranging the cards taped to her wall, correcting anyone who mentioned her birthday too early. "This year matters," she said once, with the authority of someone who knew exactly what she meant. He did not ask why. The party was small by design. A handful of classmates. A cake that leaned slightly to the left. Paper decorations taped carefully. Some crooked, some perfect. He arrived early, as he always did now, carrying nothing that would shift the balance of the room. Annie spotted him immediately. "You're here," she said. Not surprised, not relieved, just confirming a fact. Yes, he replied. Right where I said I'd be. She nodded and returned to arranging plates. The matter settled. Her mother watched him from the kitchen doorway, her expression calm, measured. Over the past year, they had learned how to occupy the same space without tension, how to speak without reopening old wounds. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't distance. It was respect shaped by shared responsibility. When the guests arrived, Annie introduced him without hesitation. "This is my dad," she said simply. No explanation followed. None was needed. The word did not strike him like thunder. It did not undo the past or rewrite it. It landed the way truth often did, when it was finally ready, quietly, firmly, without argument. He stayed where he was told to stand. He helped when asked. He listened more than he spoke. When Annie blew out her candles, she didn't close her eyes. "What did you wish for?" someone asked. Annie shrugged. "Stuff I'm already working on. What is out to God?" After the cake was cut and the children scattered into loud, chaotic play, she found him sitting on the edge of the couch, watching, but not hovering. "Did you hear?" she asked. "Hear what?" "When I said it," she replied. "Yes," he said. She studied his face, checking for something: panic, pride, pressure. Finding none, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "Just checking." And, later, when the apartment quieted again and the last guest had gone home, Annie disappeared into her room and returned with a familiar list folded in half. "Updated rules," she announced, handing it to him. He opened it carefully. "Rules now. 1. You don't leave without saying goodbye. 2. If you mess up, you say so. 3. We don't pretend. 4. We keep going." He looked up. "These are good rules." She smiled. "I know." As the evening wound down, he prepared to leave, slipping on his coat with the ease of someone who knew he would be back. Annie walked him to the door, pausing there longer than necessary. "You didn't go to the station," she said suddenly. He stilled. "No," he replied. "You always used to," she said. "Yes. Why didn't you this time?" He considered the answer carefully. "Because I wasn't waiting anymore," he said. "I was where I needed to be." She nodded, accepting it without further question. "That makes sense." Outside, the night air was mild, the street quiet. He walked home without hurry, without the familiar ache that had once accompanied this date. The past did not vanish. It simply loosened its grip. Weeks passed. Life settled into something that did not ask to be named. Annie finished the school year with a confidence that surprised even her teachers. Her mother took a new job with better hours and fewer compromises. He adjusted his work without announcement, making room where room was required. They did not pretend this was a perfect story. Sometimes Annie grew angry without knowing why. Sometimes her mother pulled back when memories resurfaced. Sometimes he woke in the night with the sharp awareness of what he had missed, but he no longer lived there. One afternoon in early April, they passed the train station together, the building standing unchanged, indifferent to the lives that had bent around it. "Is that where you waited?" Annie asked. "Yes," he said. She looked at it thoughtfully. "It looks smaller." "It always was," he replied. She slipped her hand into his, briefly, deliberately. "You don't have to go there anymore." "I know," he said. They kept walking. That summer, Annie learned to swim without clinging to the edge of the pool. He stood nearby, ready but not intruding, understanding the lesson in his bones. When she reached the other side, she looked back and grinned. "I didn't drown," she announced. "I knew you wouldn't," he said. She frowned. "How?" "Because you weren't alone," he replied. The words settled between them, not as comfort, but as fact. On a warm evening not long after, as they sat on the stoop watching the light fade, Annie leaned against his shoulder. "You know," she said casually, "some people think waiting is sad." "Yes," he agreed. "I think it depends on what you're waiting for," she continued. He smiled faintly. "You're right." She yawned, rested her head more fully against him, and closed her eyes. In that quiet moment, he understood something that had taken him decades to learn. Waiting had never been the punishment. Silence had been. And silence had finally been broken, not by anger, not by fate, not by a dramatic return but by a child who saw a ring, spoke the truth, and refused to let it stay buried. He had missed a train once, but he had not missed this life, and that quiet, ordinary, earned, was enough. The story reminds us that life's deepest wounds are often caused not by cruelty, but by silence and fear. Love does not disappear when people walk away. It waits, sometimes painfully, until truth is spoken and responsibility is taken. Real redemption does not come from grand gestures or rewriting the past, but from choosing to stay, to listen, and to be accountable in the present. In a world that often rewards success over integrity, the story affirms a quiet truth. Loyalty is proven through consistency. Justice is sometimes silent, and even the gravest mistakes can be transformed when courage replaces avoidance. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.